Ellen Gould is an Emmy Award winning actress and writer who has been writing and performing solo musicals for more than 3 decades. She's also legally blind, diagnosed with Stargardt at age 15. A few years ago, she wrote and performed a show called Seeing Stars about 5 women with Stargardts. Seeing Stars was due to open on the West End here in London, autumn of 2020, after winning top honours at the International Solo Festival in New York City. But when that opening was put on indeterminate hold due to COVID, Ellen decided to re-envisage Seeing Stars as a film, which is now well in the works. But I'll let her tell you more about herself, Seeing Stars, and how this all came to be.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. And Bhavna, thank you so much. And thank you for your warm welcome even before today. When I was first doing the show publicly, it was around the time that Bhavna was forming this organization. And I had begun to look around for communities that were connected to Stargardts in some way or other. And I saw the name of this wonderful organization, but the wonderful woman I'm working with, who's probably on the Zoom somewhere, Martha Steele, she reached out to Bhavna a couple of months ago, and here we are. So I'm more than happy to be here for so many reasons. Like all of you, I'm sure, this is very personal to me. I had a lovely career. I'm not a household name, but I've worked regularly in New York City and done mostly off-Broadway, but some Broadway and some a little bit of HBO and PBS and some of the wonderful theaters in New York, Public Theater and Lincoln Center. And I've really had more of a career than I even imagined early on, especially because it was very obvious to me when I first came to New York that it was not going to be easy. I couldn't do cold readings. And at that time, you didn't just phone in your audition. You went to a place, they gave you a script. It was an awful lot of little letters that were jumping all around the page. And thankfully, I had the kind of memory where if I pumped enough adrenaline and I really was determined, I could memorize things extremely quickly. So I managed to kind of get through and actually get parts work. But you know, it was hard. And actually, I didn't think I was going to share this story, but I think it's one of those that are extremely funny when you look back at them, but not at the time. So I had built the beginning of a career, and I was asked to audition for something at the Public Theater. I don't know if you know about what the Public Theater means to an actor in New York, but suffice it to say, it's where a chorus line was originated and then later moved to Broadway and had its enormous fame. And the Public Theater for actors was the pinnacle. If you were in something there, then you'd really made it. So I was invited to audition, and I actually got into a musical by, at that time, a very well-known writer and performer. And she had done this amazing show that was running on Broadway, and this was a new work. So I'm on my way to that first rehearsal, and I have to spend a lot of time making up, as I'm sure all of you with Stargardts, any kids out there or adults who've had to deal with it. And I was all dressed up and I was ready to go, and I figured I'd spring for a cab. So I I went out in the street, and there was an enormous truck that was parked in the intersection. So I had to walk around it, and I was walking backwards, hailing a cab that didn't come. And I'm waving and I'm waving and I'm going, oh my God, I'm going to be late for this first rehearsal. And I see this cab, and it came toward me really fast, and it came right up to me, and I thought it was gonna hit me. And I took a step back and I disappeared. I'd fallen into a manhole. I knew from the second that I was in that I had broken a bunch of ribs. It was quite a story. There were some Italian tourists who saw me, and they called the local hospital, and I was diagnosed with broken ribs and a bruised kidney, and I was flat on my back for 3 months, and I missed the first rehearsal. I missed being in the show, and I was devastated. I mean, I thought that was the end. Well, I spent that 3 months in bed writing my first solo musical, and it ended up getting rave reviews in the Times, and my career had just broken open in a way that I never would have imagined. So that's actually how I began the real heart of the career that I've had since. And by the way, one of the solo shows I wrote soon after that ended up opening at the Public Theater on the same stage as the show that I had missed because I'd fallen in that manhole. So that was kind of an interesting circle. So a little bit about this show. I have to admit that I was not out and proud about Stargardts through my career, especially when I was beginning a career. If you had any kind of issue at all, a disability, anything that could exclude you from the audition process, then that was something that most actors had to consider. And I was really afraid to let anybody know that I couldn't see well. So even with my solo shows, I wrote about so many things that related to my own life, because a lot of my shows are they start from a very personal place. But I didn't even think to write about my eyes for a long time. And after I wrote the show that I was blessed to get the Emmys for, the one that began at the Public Theater, someone reached out to me from the Lighthouse for the Blind in New York, someone I'd gone to college with. And she said, come on in. I want you to write something about your vision. I don't know how she knew about it, frankly, because I really hadn't even spoken about it too much at university, but I guess I must have shared it with her. So that was the beginning of Seeing Stars, and that was, 20 years ago. And I wrote a little piece about my own life as a kid with Stargardts and a an actor with Stargardt, but ended up being it was a mini one act. And a lot of people in my cohort, my colleagues in theater said, there's something universal in this, and you ought to try and expand it to a full-length musical. But frankly, I couldn't figure out how to do that. The thought of doing an entire show about my own life, I mean, it kind of felt like a person at 25 writing their autobiography, excuse me, February. And I didn't know how to do it. So I would go back to it periodically in between the other shows I was writing. And I tried a whole bunch of things, but nothing really landed. Nothing felt right. And then about 8 years ago, I saw what it could be. I was going to reach out to women who had Stargardts as a kid, like I did, and see what their lives are like now, what their experience was. And that began the journey, the long second act of the journey of this show. I almost didn't do it. There was a moment just before I was going to have the interview with the first woman, who is now a very dear friend. And I was scared. I was afraid I was going to interact with a bunch of limping, disabled people. I mean, that's how I didn't even understand how, to some degree, I'd internalized that within myself. And writing the show was a process of liberating my own self-criticism. I was really afraid, and I thought, I don't know if I want to do this. Well, I met one of the most kick-ass women with a phenomenal sense of humor, who left me in the dust about what she was able to do. She was nearly blind already at that point. She was incredibly accomplished. To protect her anonymity, I'm not going to tell you what she does, but she was at the top of her field. And it was something, I think, incredibly challenging for someone with advanced Stargardts. And then I continued to meet other women. And I ended up with too many because there were so many remarkable women. And I took a year just gathering their monologues, taped them with their permission. Their stories now semi-fictionalized, and I had their blessing and their release to do this. And they range in age from 19 to, that age, including myself. I'm the writer in this show, and I play all the characters. And these characters are both real or potentially part of the writer's imagination. When you see the show, that'll all become clear. But I get to play, as I said, this wonderful woman who is the first I interviewed, a recovering Southern Baptist whose pastor told her when she was 12 that her vision was that way for a reason. It was for God's glory. And because of that, can I use mild profanity on this, Bhavna? She's muted, I think. Okay, I'm
Yes,
just going to
yeah,
say,
mild,
yeah.
yeah.
So her comment was when the pastor said, well, you know, your eyes are this way for a reason. This is for God's glory. This is how God gets his glory. And she said, well, that's got to be some selfish son of a bitch. So that is the character of, I call her Mallory. Then there's a character named Dory, who is probably 50 something in this. And she is the head of accessibility at a large vision support organization, something like the Lighthouse. And she does an accessibility rap about a lot of the different tools that we use to be able to see, from handheld magnifiers to that one arm thing, that kind of television closed television. I can't remember the name of it. Trying to think. Yes, one of my favorites, the crowd pleaser, is the 19-year-old beauty pageant queen who walks the runway, and her guide about how to do that. And also, she writes what she calls her badass blog called Blind Girl Swag. And she has one of her entries is about blind girl on a blind date. One is about blind girl in Vegas. She's got a whole bunch of wonderful ones. And oh my God, she gave me permission to musicalize them, which I did. And one of my favorite of the songs of the show is Walking Down the Runway. And it's just walking down the runway, locking down a Dundee, doing what I have to, ought to, want to, flying to a new town, strutting in a ball gown, trying not to fall down on my way. It's very early in the morning for me here in New York, but you'll hear it the way it has to be when you actually see the film. So that's Connor. And I'm trying to think of the other. There's a lovely young woman from the Dominican Republic, where I understand there are an enormous number of Stargardt's clusters in families. A lot of researchers are trying to figure out why. This woman is based on a number of people. She's largely fictionalized, but she holds the central metaphor of the film, which is something I found out when I was doing research writing this. And this was one of, there are those moments when an actor, writer is looking to create something, and you hear what is the heart of it, what you're doing. And that happened the day when I was researching to write Astrid, the young woman from Dominican Republic. I spoke with a I forget what they call them. Well, someone at the planetarium. She's an educator, but a very particular kind, and she works with all of the particulars that go into creating the shows. So I managed to get an introduction to her, and I said to her, I'm writing a show about people with a particular vision impairment, and it's called Seeing Stars. And I intuit that there's always some kind of relationship between our own physical bodies and the astral bodies. I mean, we're part of nature. And I wanted to find out if there was some corollary uh, between how we see and something about, you know, the larger universe, stars particularly. And she said, well, tell me about this disease. And I said, we have part of our central retina, our macula, burnt out, and our detail vision is limited. So very often to see what's right in front of us, we have to use our peripheral vision to see it, to locate it. And she said, I have it. She said, when any of us try to see a light, a star, in a distant star that isn't fully bright, we need to use something called averted vision, which is effectively peripheral vision. And the reason is because more of the light receptors just begin in the periphery. So when you have a faraway distant light, if you look straight at it, it'll disappear. Much like when we look through our blind spot, that everyone experiences the loss of central vision. And so they have to use their averted vision to see a distant star. And then she said to me, some astronomers even call it averted imagination. And it was reverberating. It was the moment. When we get to the end of this, I'll share with you the end of the show, because it relates to what I've just spoken about. And I know all of you will understand probably more than the general audience will when you hear it. Okay, so a couple of things I wanted to speak about, and maybe things that we can talk about later or you can talk about in the breakout groups. I got a very touching note that came through my website about, I don't know, a week ago. And I think the gentleman that wrote to me is actually on the Zoom today. And I'm sorry I didn't reach out to you directly. I was busy preparing for this. But he spoke to something that I mentioned at the beginning here, and that is written in all of my materials and on the website, that I was very afraid to be out about my vision. And he wrote to me something that touched me deeply, that now in his mature years, after having had Stargardt since he was a kid like me, that he still is very careful about whom he tells, and that he understood very much what I was talking about. And I wanted to speak to him, to all of you out there who either have Stargardts or have children or teens or grown adults now who have Stargardts, and to also to yourselves. The thing that I think I learned most from writing the show is that I don't have to hide anymore. I don't. I tell everyone I'm totally comfortable with it now. I go into a supermarket and I say to some guy who's packing the shelves, excuse me, I'm visually impaired. Would you be so kind as to tell me what that says up at the top. And he does. And I say, I really appreciate you. Thank you so much. And he feels great. And I get my information. And there's nothing bad about the fact that I can't see what's up there. And I learned it from one of the characters, one of the women who is now one of the characters in the show. Let me see if I can get her words exactly, because I haven't been rehearsing this for a while. Let's see. She says, she talks about, she's very, very strong about people being out there. And she talks about, why is it that some people with Stargardts never make it through the tunnel and other people do very well? The people who are out about it, I'm sorry, I can't remember this. People who are out about it, whatever. She said, there are some people who don't talk about it and some people who do. And the ones who do, she says, when you're comfortable with yourself, the world is comfortable with you. I did that for a group of people who are blind and visually impaired as a first reading with book in hand, an organization called Visions in New York City. And when Dory said that line, people stood up and began to applaud. And their dogs, their guide dogs, were making noise. Everybody, it stopped the reading. And it stopped me. And it made me understand so powerfully that not only was there nothing wrong with me or anyone who has a different kind of vision, but it's become really a source of pride because nothing stops me. Nothing stops you. The way we see differently gives something extra. Whether, as Bhavna said, her son's friends are more sensitized to difference at a young age. What a gift. What a gift to them, not just to her son. But and this is the metaphor too. Most people see what's right in front of them. And what's right in front of you often is proscribed. People have been there. That road has been traveled. But we have to look all around to see the whole picture. As I said, we have to look up to the left, to the right, to the top, to the bottom, out to every point and to each side. We make a star. We have to look all around to see the whole picture. There's this incredible guy who works in accessibility tools at Microsoft, and he shared something with me that they talk about at their meetings. He said, it's not just that we look outside the box. We don't see the box. So people who see differently, do differently, move differently, we have different things to offer. And if there's any message that the show has or that I would want to share or convey to particularly parents, because now that I'm way older, then when I got this, I understand now what my parents went through, even though I didn't feel it at the time. I was a kid. What did I know? And I didn't understand what kind of terror they probably had for me. They had no idea I was not going to stop me, and they supported me in every way they could, which helped me do everything that I was able to do. So this is not a sentence. It's not the period at the end of a sentence. It's just the beginning of the story. So now I'll share with you the end of the story or the show. Don't tell anybody. So at the very end, the writer, who's gone through a journey of fear that she might be losing more vision, talks to the audience. She's about to be called into the doctor's office to hear her fate. The entire show is about her being in an office for her twice yearly checkup and going through it in real time with tests, some of them visual and interesting. Tests that turn into planetarium shows and all kinds of lovely, fun things. In between, her different characters, her stars, guide her through that fearful, potentially fearful journey. Now you're at the end. She's about to walk into the doctor's office, but she's armed with their stories and beginning to feel like she will be able to deal with whatever comes. And at the end, she walks out to the audience and says to them directly, when you need to see the light in your dark sky, just avert your eye. You'll see a star. But we who need to see both far and near with our averted vision, our averted imagination, we are always seeing stars.